Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar. We'll also have a look at the GFS, the GEM, the ECMWF and the GFS Ensembles, and we'll finish up having a look at the UKMO office run as well. Now it is looking like we could be seeing a lot of high pressure around towards the end of this week. However, you can see on the live radar at the moment in the north and the west, we could be seeing a lot of rain as we do have a stagnant weather front as that high pressure tries to move in. So do remember, if you enjoyed my videos, make sure to like and subscribe, and do remember to follow on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. So we do have a look at the live radar. Generally, things are pretty dry and pretty pleasant. However, you can see we've got heavy rain approaching over the coming hours this evening. That heavy rain is going to be moving into many parts of western Scotland and still spreading in through Ireland and Northern Ireland as well. But elsewhere, it's been pretty dry, pretty pleasant. A lot of sunshine around. A bit chilly though, as we do have some cooler air over the top of the country. However, it should be trending a little bit warmer over the coming days with the high pressure building in. Now, we do have yellow warnings for rain in force for this heavy rain in the northwest. Now, it is mainly over the hills of western Scotland. We had a look at this yesterday. Heavy rain bringing the risk of flooding and transport disruption. So from tomorrow at midnight all the way until midday on Saturday. So almost 3-day warning here. Impact assessment has been lowered since it was last updated since it was updated today. Air expanded a bit further northwards, and warning has been moved into Saturday. So 40 to 70 millimetres will build up quite widely, 100 to 150 millimetres potentially, very likely to happen. Not as high impact as we've seen before, but still there could be some issues, especially sort of downstream with potentially some flooding as all this rain comes in off the mountains and the hills into the rivers. So we'll have to keep an eye out for that, and if you are anywhere near this area, do keep an eye out for any Met Office warnings or even environmental agency warnings, where they will potentially be putting out some flood warnings if we do see sufficient rain. But it is in a localised area, and many areas, especially in the east and for most of England, Wales, it's going to be pretty decent over the coming days. So if we do run through the GFS, you can see at the moment that low pressure that brought some very heavy rain over the last few days is clearing, and high pressure is building up from the south. However, you can see ex-Hurricane Sam, which is still packing a punch out in the Atlantic. It's not going to impact the UK directly. However, you can see it is bringing up sort of a moisture train. You can see there's quite warm, humid air coming up from the southwest, and where that collides with the low pressure, where we see this air mass change, that is where we are seeing this stagnant weather front develop over the northwest, and that's why we could be seeing a lot of rain, and that's why we have a yellow warning in force. However, elsewhere we've got high pressure around and fairly decent upper air temperatures, not massively warm but decent, and we could be seeing temperatures get up to around 20-21 degrees now. About a week ago, or maybe about 4 or 5 days ago, we were looking at the possibility of an Indian summer sort of pattern, but you can see that very hot air that's sitting to our south never quite gets stretched all the way up to the UK, as we do start to build in high pressure further westwards, which actually does turn things cooler. And you can see some quite cold air to seep down the eastern half of the country, and I wouldn't be surprised if we did see potentially some very cold nights and maybe some frosts, even some more widespread sort of areas, as we have, of course, seen some temperatures dipped below freezing already this autumn, but they've mainly been in some very sheltered spots, rural spots as well, whereas with this sort of pattern we could be seeing it even in some towns and cities. Beyond that, the high pressure does start to topple, so warmer air does come back in once again. It's trying to hold off this low in the Atlantic, but does eventually lose outright towards the end of the run. And right at the end, we do have some northern blocking in and around Greenland, and we are starting to pull in a northerly wind. Now, I did point this out in yesterday's video. We have a low polar vortex, or tropospheric polar vortex, let me be precise, sitting over sort of Siberia and Scandinavia, which is a good thing if you are looking for a cold winter. as if we had that sat over Greenland, it would be encouraging westerly winds. With it sat further eastwards, we can see a pattern like this, where it's encouraging a bit of high pressure building up towards Greenland, a brief ridge, and you can see we're starting to pull in northerly winds. Now, of course, we are in sort of mid to end of October, so there isn't that much cold air really available, but it's an interesting sign to see in the longer term. So if we do now have a look at the GM, see how that does compare, you can see the high pressure building in over the coming days. Turning things pretty decent, especially in the south. You can see 10-degree isotherm gets through, which is pretty decent. However, we do see that cold air does sort of swing in from the north, but the high pressure topples much faster than anticipated. We do see a low sweep through, and we could be seeing our first real sort of northerly blast. Now, we've had northerly winds so far this autumn, but you can see quite a big area of quite cold air is sinking down all the way from sort of Iceland and Greenland, and the -5 isotherm getting through Scotland, and I would not be surprised, especially overnight, to see some wintry showers in Scotland, where we see that -5 line move through. If we zoom into the United Kingdom, look, you can see some quite chilly air is coming down, and you can even see -7, -8 degree isotherm, which is firmly snow territory to low levels moving in, but of course, sun strength is still to a relatively high level that if we really did want any wintriness, you would really be having to look overnight or over hills. But again, can change, of course, and this is a minority run compared to what we saw with the GFS. And what we'll see with the ensembles in a minute, of course. So if you look at the ECMWF, see how that does compare. High pressure built in, and then we do see that brief northerly sort of wind with some cooler air moving in, especially down the east. And then we see the high pressure sort of hold off that low pressure that actually made its way in on the GM. And we could be turning things a little bit warmer again. You can see another big Atlantic system, probably again remnants of an ex-hurricane, dragging up quite warm air from the southwest. We're in a bit of a battleground situation between some cold air trying to sink out of the Arctic and this low pressure out in the Atlantic trying to draw up some really quite warm air out from sort of the mid-Atlantic. So we'll have to keep an eye on what happens with that in the longer term. So if we do have a look at the GFS ensembles over the next 14 days, you can see for London, generally things are looking very dry. At least for the next sort of 7 to 10 days, there is very minimal precipitation spikes. Beyond that, there are a few cropping up, but again, nothing too massive. You can see over the next sort of 3-4 days, temperature is going to be above average, pretty decent indeed, with temperatures getting up to around 8-9 degrees at 850 HPA, and we'll look at the UK Met Office run in a minute, and that could give temperatures in and around 20, maybe 21 degrees. However, as we head towards sort of the 11th, 12th of October, we do see quite a stark drop-off as we see that northerly breeze come in. Now, this is not the northerly sort of blast we saw in the GM, this is the general sort of colder air seeping in around the high pressure, so it won't be accompanied by any wintriness really, but it could potentially give a few areas overnight frosts as we do see temperatures really dip down. Beyond that, temperatures do recover, but again, there is a lot of uncertainty with that, and you can see a lot of scatter with some really warm ensemble runs and some really quite cold ensemble runs. So beyond maybe 13th, 14th October, there is a lot of uncertainty in there. If we have a look at the sea level pressure, you can see generally high pressure, everything towards the top of the chart, everything around 1,030 millibars. Really quite decent, especially for London. A bit of a drop-off towards the end of the run, but again, that's expected as we have more uncertainty within the ensembles. But it does look really quite decent. So hopefully you can go out and enjoy the drier weather. And as I said, probably next week it won't be quite warm. It won't be particularly warm. It'll probably be quite chilly, but it will still be dry, which is really, to be honest, not too bad for this time of year, because we could be having a lot of low pressure like we've had recently, and having that continue. If we have a look at Glasgow, see how it compares in the north, you can see low pressure at the moment, simply because of ex-Hurricane Sam out in the Atlantic, which is trying to hold off that high pressure, and that's giving us that moisture train and that rain. However, you do see temperature does rise over the coming days, and we do eventually reach around 1,030 millibars, relatively decent high pressure before it does start to drop off in the longer term. If we have a look at the temperature, 850 HPA and precipitation, you can see quite high temperatures over the coming days. Good 5, 6, 7 degrees above average and a lot of precipitation. Moisture train, as I've said before, bringing up a lot of warm, or at least relatively warm for this time of year, humid air in from the southwest, stagnant weather front, and we're going to be seeing quite a lot of persistent rain, especially in the northwest. Then we see that big drop off, but it does accompany by dry conditions as that high pressure builds in, but does bring in some cooler air from the north. Some uncertainty as there are still some warmer outliers, but generally most are getting below 0 degrees at 850 HPA, which of course gives the potential of overnight frosts. Beyond that, we do have a lot more scatter than we had for London, but that is pretty typical this time of year as we do have the Atlantic trying to break through, whereas for London we're more in the control of sort of the Euro high, which is building in over the coming days. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. There is some signal, some dry weather coming up between maybe the 10th of October and the 16th, but again there are still some precipitation spikes and a lot of uncertainty at this stage. So if we do go through the UKMO office run to finish the video, you can see we have that rain approaching in the west, and that's going to continue pushing in, take over most of Scotland before mainly being confined to the west, and then you can just see just this moisture train of just continual showers and heavier pulses of rain pushing in to the west. Potentially some rain at times in northern England, northwest, and a lot of rain potentially through Ireland, Northern Ireland as well. And it just continues, this line of rain, for eventually it starts to move southeastwards, but it does, of course, lose its potency as it runs into high pressure. And beyond that, we do see just a few showers generally over Scotland. If we have a look at the max temperatures at ground level, you can see today it's been decent in a few spots, maybe 15, 16 degrees, but generally pretty chilly for most. For tomorrow, temperatures could respond a lot better than they have today. We could see 18, 19 or 20 degrees potentially in central areas. However, where we have that rain pushing in, still maybe only low to mid-teens. Beyond that, and looking at Friday, we could see temperatures once again 18, 19, 20 degrees, but where we have that weather front further northwards and westwards, temperatures a good 5 degrees down on what they would be without the rain and the cloud. Saturday, still relatively decent, 16, 17, 18 degrees potentially in the south, but you can see colder air is swinging in from the north. By Sunday, you can see a big contrast, really chilly in the north, only around 9, 10, 11 degrees, and areas in northern England struggling into the low teens, whereas in the south, still 18, 19 degrees as we're hanging on to that warmer air. And by sort of early hours of Monday, you can start to see some colder air starting to sink in from the north, and you can see generally over Scotland, mid-single digits. So it does look like we could be seeing something colder coming next week. Nothing wintry, but there is the potential of a little bit of frost here or there, and again we'll have to keep an eye on sort of the surface conditions, as again it is around 5, 6, 7, 8 days away from seeing this cooler northerly wind, so it is still subject to change, and we've just got to keep an eye out for that. But for the meantime, if you're in sort of the south, the east, or even the Midlands, do go out and enjoy the generally warm autumnal sort of pattern we're going to be seeing with temperatures in around the high teens, maybe 20, 21 degrees. So go out and enjoy that. As I keep saying this, at some point we're going to flip, and it is going to be pretty much cool, sort of 9, 10 degree days until springtime, of course. So do make sure you cherish any of these last few days of warmth we do have. However, if you're in the north and the west, where we could be seeing a lot of persistent rain at times, do make sure you stay safe out there. Don't go out and need floodwaters if we do see anything accumulate, and do keep an eye on warnings, especially the Environmental Agency, as they will be issuing flood warnings if there is sufficient risk. So anyway, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.